What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and this episode is brought to you by the fact that barbers are not considered essential employees as far as our government is concerned, and all the crazy hair that you're going to be seeing from a lot of content creators, not to mention your loved ones in the near future. All right, so very cool. So today we are getting back to Ikoria spoilers, and it's funny. Today I was actually looking through the sheet every day. Usually, what I do um, for this show is take a look at a random magic card and I just go right off the top, just record and talk about it for 10 minutes, whatever comes to mind. With the Ikoria spoilers, what I've been doing is I've been going out to mythicspoilers.com, just taking a look at all of the spoilers that have come out on that particular day, and just kind of skimming through them and then just seeing one that catches my eye, kind of going, huh, that's interesting, downloading the image, jumping in here, and recording it. So I have had a few minutes to think about it, but not a ton. And this one, so as I was looking through which ones am I going to look at today, when I read this card, I just kind of stopped and was like, is that for real? Are you for real? Is that really here? Is this, yeah, and let's just get into it. So today we are looking at the Ozolith or Ozolith. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. So it's a legendary artifact for one. Keep that in mind, guys. This only costs one enchantment or one mana. Sorry, it's a legendary artifact, not an enchantment. And it costs one mana, just one. And that one mana, what do you get for it? It is a legendary artifact. It's a rare, not even a mythic, mind you. This is rare. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. Let's just appreciate that for a second. This is a safe deposit box for all of your counters. All of them. Plus one counters, charge counters if they happen to be on creatures, all of the keyword counters that we're seeing in Ikoria, verse counters, which you see on certain legendary creatures. I mean, the implications here are really vast. You can do a lot of cool stuff with this, and so with how many counters we see from different creatures that enter the battlefield with counters on them, um, we have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of crazy jank with this. And this kind of reminds me a little bit of a card called Power Conduit, which was an uncommon back in Mirrodin. It cost two, and you could tap it, remove a counter from a creature, or remove a counter from a permanent you controlled. Any counter, any permanent, didn't matter. And you could move, or then you could add a plus one counter or a charge counter to a target creature or artifact or target artifact you controlled. So, kind of the same idea. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, even Power Conduit was based off of an uncard, an unglued card from back in the day called Giant Fan that involved moving counters around. So with Power Conduit, when they made a black bordered Giant Fan, the way the Giant Fan had worked is you were able to move like all of your counters from one permanent to another, or something like that. Like, or you could move like all counters you owned to one permanent, or something like really weird and kind of silly like that. Well, what Power Conduit did, kind of the black bordered version back in the day, was it would remove a counter of any kind, didn't matter. So the removal was really flexible. You could do all kinds of stuff with that. But the counter that was being added to the permanent had to be either a plus one counter or a charge counter. Now, in that set, there was a ton of different uses for that. Um, in that block, you had a million and a half different charge counter payoffs, not to mention the modular creatures and all kinds of stuff, like all kinds of benefits for those two particular type of counters. So 90% of the time, that's what you wanted anyway. But but it also limited a number of other options that you had. It limited your ability to really break the game. Well, now with Ozolith, that limitation, the limitation of only being able to add a very limited number of counters or limited types of counters to a particular target, that's no longer the case. That's not an issue anymore. Um, and on top of that, these counters, um, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still just kind of blown away by this. This card just has me completely gobsmacked. I'm really shocked that they added this because I was always of the impression when I read Power Conduit. Now, granted, that card was printed what 15 years ago at this point. I think yeah, about 15, 16 years ago, something like that. Um, and I don't know if the thunder's coming. Yeah, there's actually a really gnarly thunderstorm going on outside right now. So if that comes in on the microphone, I'll be actually be pretty impressed. Um, because I was of the impression this headset was pretty localized. Anyway, that is neither here nor there. Just a fun little moment for while we're recording. With Power Conduit, I was pretty confident that the reason that they were willing to print a card that allowed you to move counters in a black bordered set was that there was a limitation around what types of counters. With Ozolith, you don't have that. The type of counter just it just goes along with it. Now, there is one little failsafe that I can't help but notice they built into this card, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. There is some flexibility that it's lacking. So whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, if it had counters, those counters go on to Ozolith. Period. And end of story. All of them. Positive counters, negative counters, doesn't matter. If you're going up against, say, an infect deck, if you had a negative one counters on one of your creatures, too bad. Those are coming along too. Um, yeah, but if you have trample counters, hexproof counters, plus one counters, all that jazz, those come along as well. And so, okay. So if we're in a situation where there are negative counters, oh my goodness, there's another implication of this in Commander that just struck me. Bounty counters. That's a thing. Where if a person is trying to leverage this, if you're putting bounty counters on their creatures, then all of a sudden, whenever the creature with the bounty dies, that bounty counter just immediately goes onto an or well, the bounty counter will go to the next to a new creature if they're positive counters that the owner of Ozolith wants to take advantage of. So the way that it works is at the beginning of the Ozolith controller's combat phase, they can move all of the counters that are on Ozolith, all of them, not any number of them, not specific ones, not a counter. It's all or nothing. You're getting every single thing that's on here or nothing at all. And as a result, what you end up with is if there are 5 or 6 trample counters on there, well, it doesn't matter. You can only distribute those to one creature. They all go together. And the fact that it's a redundant effect doesn't freaking matter. It has trample 5 times. What does that mean as far as the game is concerned? Nothing. It has trample. That's it. You can have trample 1 time, 5 times, 20 times, doesn't freaking matter. It's completely and totally redundant. So you get diminishing returns if you're using keyword counters. You can't stack that on top of each other because I know the very first thing you think of is, oh man, everything I have is going to have trample counters, and I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that I can spread those out to all my creatures. No, it doesn't work with go wide strategies. And when I say go wide, I mean having a lot of little creatures. It doesn't work, just straight up. You can't really leverage it that way. Now, if you're leveraging mutate and you're putting a whole bunch of stock in one creature and you're trying to create the biggest, baddest monster on the block, all of a sudden Ozolith is a brilliant tool to help you get there because a lot of creatures come into play with counters on them. And if you can blink those creatures, if you can sacrifice those creatures, if you can do something to get those creatures off the battlefield, get those counters onto Ozolith, then you can pull those counters off of Ozolith, throw them onto the creature that you're beefing up. That's going to be, your win con, your focus, you're that big hit that you're going to deliver to your opponent. That all, I mean, that's a really cool moment. You get to have that with this. That's really slick. I like it. But yeah, so now I'm trying to think of going up against this thing because there are ways around it. There are ways to beat it. I mean, the most obvious is artifact destruction. It is legendary. It is an artifact. If you can destroy an artifact, cool. You can also use cards like engineered explosives, blasting zone, those cards that destroy permanents that are a certain CMC, and those with just one counter on it will blow this up quite nicely. So if there is a deck in competitive where Ozolith, if there's a deck in standard, let's say, where Ozolith becomes a valuable inclusion that is a part of a larger game plan, which with it only costing 1, there's a very real chance that's going to happen. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that works. That's the other thing. When you see a card that costs 1 or 2 that has a pretty cool effect, keep an eye out because those tend to be in my experience I've noticed that the really low CMC cards that have cool potentially powerful effects are the ones that could take that next step and become really powerful and really competitive. um, I mean that's just anecdotal, take that for what it's worth. But I think this thing has a home in a competitive standard deck. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now we're looking at World Championships and there's at least one deck in whatever meta, whatever shakes out. I wouldn't be surprised if this is in there. I don't know how it's going to look. I haven't seen a lot. It'll be really interesting to see how things shake out. This is the joy of standard, is that it all changes and we get to watch it all change. And fortunately, we can all participate on Arena with a very minimal investment. I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, so there is one other element of Ozolith that I wanted to bring up, that I wanted to speak to for this particular podcast. Um, there's one card that is one of my favorite board wipes in Commander specifically, that is a beautiful counter to Ozolith. So if you can destroy an enchantment, great. If you can remove permanents, or if you can remove counters from enchantments, that's another thing. Or remove counters from any permanent. That's something that you can leverage with Ozolith. And there is no better way, in my opinion, to do that than with a little card called Aether Snap. Well, and of course, that's not really showing up too well on the camera, so let's just go ahead and pull it up right here. So, Aether Snap is a sorcery for 5. It is 3 and 2 black. Remove all counters from all permanents and remove all tokens from the game. So, I actually dusted this off in some of my commander decks, specifically when War of the Spark dropped, because what this also says is um, destroy all planeswalkers. You completely eradicate all planeswalkers because you are keeping track of their loyalty with loyalty counters. You remove all those counters, they have 0 loyalty, they all die. So my thought was, hey, that Atraxis Super Friends deck that my buddies always bring to the table. Aether Snap just says, hey, destroy that. Just get rid of it, get it gone for 5. That's pretty great. And I thought, hey, this was really cool. Now, with all the planeswalkers that we saw in War of the Spark, Aether Snap was good. At 5, it's a little expensive for a board wipe, which is why I'm specifically saying Commander is the place for this. You're definitely not going to see this run in any kind of modern situation, or at least I would be shocked if you did. Modern or I don't. It's not Pioneer legal, but in any case, um, I have a feeling that this is going to be valuable again. Right now it's going for 60 cents, so it's not. If you just need a board wipe for a deck that has black in it, I would consider it because it doesn't destroy creatures per se, except for certain ones. Like I wouldn't help but you couldn't help but notice that it kills most hydras that are out there because they start as 0/0 creatures. I mean, a lot of them anyway. So that's pretty great. Also, Yorvo, that dude would get completely knocked off with this. But if your opponent is running a strategy where they are trying to stockpile counters or create a lot of these fun new keyword counters that we're seeing in Ikoria, Ozolith is an engine towards that goal. Aether Snap is a beautiful counter, and I just got to throw it out there, the little plug. This is one of those little gems from Darksteel way back in the day. I adore it. Based on the fact that it's going for like 60 bucks right now, or I'm sorry, 60 cents right now. Wrong unit of measure. That makes a big difference. Yeah, it's going for about 60 cents. It's not worth a ton. I suspect that in your local play group, as people are dusting off their new Ikoria toys in EDH, I suspect that there are going to be some plays that you could set up with this that could really swing the game in your favor. So I just wanted to throw that out there, a little public service announcement. Hey guys, go check out Aether Snap. It's pretty great. Cool, cool. Yeah. So the Ozolith, I gotta say, I'm really stoked. I'm interested to see what happens with it. If the counter support is there, I think this has an opportunity to be a really cool card in the right setting. It has a lot of potential, and it gives you the option of keeping all of your counters around no matter what happens. So any kind of aristocrats situation, like actually that's it. That's the deck that I want to run. So right now I have a Rakdos aristocrats deck, which I've commonly or which I've heard to referred to as snack dose because it's using the witch's oven to create food tokens. I love that deck. It's great, super fun, very competitive. It's delightful. I want to see a version of that. I want to see Rakdos aristocrats. So you're sacrificing little creatures constantly. You're sacrificing little creatures over and over again to trigger different effects. Death triggers with Mayhem Devil or enter the battlefield triggers with Iara, those types of things. Where I want to see somebody leveraging that where you're sacrificing creatures, but all of the creatures that you're sacrificing have counters on them that all go into Ozolith. So you dump all of them in Ozolith, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, you have a menace counter, you have a trample counter, you have a death touch counter, you have a fear counter, you have a flying counter, you have a vigilance counter, you have a hexproof counter, you have six plus one counters or whatever. You just have all of these counters on Ozolith, and then just immediately boom, drop it all onto your Woe Strider or the goat that the Woe Strider brought in. Um, and just swing out with that to win the game. I think that that could be this allows a new finisher for that type of setup. Now, are the support pieces there to really make this effective? I don't know. I haven't seen them yet, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. I know we do have I believe it's a 3/3. No, sorry, 2/3. There's a 3/3. Grim Dancer was a card that Reed Duke spoiled just the other day. I believe it was 1, 2, and 2 black, and it comes into play with three or sorry, it comes into play with two keyword counters on it, and you get to choose between Menace, Fear, and Death Touch, I think. So it's kind of like three kind of B, keyword players. But I think they're generally underappreciated. I think those abilities are pretty great, and yeah. And so all of a sudden, like that would be a really great fit in this type of deck. What I'm envisioning here, because then that comes into play with two counters on it. You sacrifice it to another. You sacrifice it to something akin to a carrion feeder that puts a +1/+1 counter on it, and then yeah. Anyway, the possibilities here are it's here. There's an opportunity here to do some really fun things, and I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. I'm definitely looking forward to brewing with it. Yeah, that's on my radar, and I'm gonna be sure. I'm stockpiling some rare wild cards because if I don't crack that in my first couple of drafts, I'm definitely gonna go after it. Yeah, this is good stuff, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it as always. I stream over on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhocks42. And then this is also Overthinking MTG, my podcast. It's also available with video on YouTube. And yeah, it's available anywhere you get your podcasts. So I do this every day where I look at a random card and talk about it for at least 10 minutes. So thanks so much for hanging out. It's been a pleasure, and I will catch you next time.